rest of them. God whirls off somewhere, leaving Job to reflect. There in the dust, Job leaves his rage behind and arrives at something like acceptance. The tears fall hot and thick. God, he cries, I was ungrateful. I took my blessings for granted. Please forgive me. In an act of mercy, God puts Job's life back together. New wife, new kids, new sheep, and Job lives happily ever after. It feels right to be writing this book here, overlooking Washington Square Park, my first home in New York City. I lived in NYU's Hayden Hall on Washington Square East, and the epicenter of my own fat sheep moment, those years when I was first, most fully myself before the fall that is adulthood and all the things after, so many things gained and blighted and shattered and lost, until, sitting there in the dust, you breathe it all in and calmly assemble the pieces into something new, something you think you can live with. And here's where you have to be careful. Put anything together in any order and it becomes a story. And stories, like songs, get stuck in your head. The insistent melody of narrative plays on repeat until the life it frames starts to fade. The way it felt to be 9 years old is swallowed up by a single photograph of yourself at a Burger King birthday party wearing a bent paper crown. And when this happens, it's easy to forget two things: that the story is your own creation, and that no story is ever complete. That's how this one was supposed to begin. Washington Square, framed from above in the big picture windows of the East Asian Reading Room. A lofty perspective on this place of great symbolic meaning. Instead, I'm at ground level, in the Starbucks across the street, with a flavorless turkey, bacon, and egg white sandwich. The Office of Alumni Giving, which hasn't opened yet, needs to send an email to the Library Privileges window, which opened late, stating that I donated the $275 that allows me reading privileges. Instead of the reverent silence and shelves lined with Buddhist texts I'd imagined as the backdrop to these ruminations, I've got Starbucks auto-tuned R&B. How apt that this story about abrupt plot twists and endings and how they derail us should itself begin with a derailment. That it should start by forcing me to adapt to a new reality less perfect than the one I had planned. This is a book about two people I loved and lost too early. It's also about mourning. To the extent that life becomes a struggle between the stories we try to tell and the rewrites the world throws back at us, each sudden change in the narrative is a kind of trauma. It's a shock to our expectations. And trauma needs to be processed or mourned. We can't shrug it off, rail against it, or power through without consequences. This is true both of big, dramatic changes like death and of smaller ones, the more manageable revisions of everyday life. A relationship fails. A pandemic obliterates your carefully cultivated daily workout routine. You end up starting your memoir in a Starbucks. The degree of trauma depends on how attached you are to any given storyline. And where there's trauma, its hold on your life can only be loosened by seeing it clearly, fully, and compassionately enough to move on. In other words, by mourning. 2,500 years before I stole that library book, Buddhism had captured this thought in its second noble truth, that the origin of human suffering is tanha, variously translated into English from Pali, the ancient Sanskrit-related language spoken by Siddhartha Gautama, the historical figure known as the Buddha, as thirst, desire, or greed. For modern-day Americans, like me, this idea can be tough to swallow. In our culture, ambition is a sacred value. It's what drives us to attempt the kinds of things that have tended to make it into our history books. It's the desire that produces growth under capitalism, through grand entrepreneurial visions and private purchases. Anything that questions the natural law of desire is at best considered marginal, at worst, a flirtation with heresy. The problem with tanha, though, isn't so much in wanting things as in the habit of pursuing those desires in every area of our lives without question, which leads to the stubborn refusal to let go of their fruits, even after they're long lost,